The scent of stale coffee and lukewarm maple syrup clung to the air of the Diner's Delight, a roadside establishment just off Interstate 95 in southern New Jersey. It was a place where truckers paused, and local families celebrated birthdays with greasy fries. Ethan Miller had known this scent for the past 7 years. At 24, his life felt as predictable as the rotating neon sign outside, flashing "eat, then drink" in a tired sequence. Ethan was tall and lean, with the kind of perpetual weariness around his eyes that long hours and short tips cultivate. He wasn't unhappy, but he wasn't thriving either. He was simply existing, moving through the motions, wipe the counter, refill the sugar caddy, charm the regulars, and endure the night shift boss, a man named Sal, whose perpetual grimace seemed carved into his face. On a Tuesday afternoon in late October, the diner was quieter than usual. Ethan was polishing the same smudge on the same chrome coffee machine for the 10th time when the bell above the door chimed, announcing a new arrival. It wasn't a trucker, or a noisy family. It was an elderly woman, dressed in a surprisingly elegant, though slightly dated, wool coat and carrying a small, worn leather handbag. Eleanor Vance was her name, though Ethan wouldn't learn that until much later. She moved with a fragile, almost hesitant grace, leaning heavily on a carved mahogany cane. Her silver hair was meticulously pinned, and her expression was one of profound, almost painful exhaustion. "Booth 6, Ethan. Get her some water, she looks like she's seen a ghost," Sal grunted from behind the cash register, not looking up from his racing form. Ethan nodded and picked up a clean menu. He guided the woman to a booth in the back, the one farthest from the buzzing fluorescent light. As she slid into the seat, the simple movement seemed to drain the last of her energy. "Welcome to the Diner's Delight, ma'am," Ethan said gently, placing the menu down. "Can I get you something to start? Coffee, tea, perhaps a soda?" Eleanor didn't look at the menu. Her eyes, a startlingly bright blue despite the surrounding fatigue, fixed on Ethan. Her lips were cracked, and her breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. Water," she whispered, the sound thin and papery, barely audible over the hiss of the fryers. "Please. Just, water. And a moment." "Absolutely," Ethan replied, sensing the urgency beneath her quiet demeanor. He didn't ask her order again. He didn't mention that diner special. He simply walked directly to the service station, grabbed the cleanest glass he could find, and filled it with ice water, ensuring it was filtered and cold. When he returned, Eleanor's head was resting against the vinyl backrest of the booth. Her eyes were closed. For a terrifying moment, Ethan thought she might have collapsed. He reached the table and spoke softly, "Ma'am. Here is your water." She stirred slowly, her blue eyes fluttering open. A weak smile touched her lips, a look of genuine gratitude that went beyond the standard customer appreciation. "Thank you, young man," she murmured, her voice a little stronger now. "You have no idea how far I've come." Ethan placed the glass carefully on the table, close to her hand. Eleanor's hand, gnarled and frail, shook as she reached for it. She couldn't lift it. The few ounces of glass and liquid were too much. Seeing her struggle, Ethan instinctively did something he had never done for a customer before. He lifted the glass and gently held the rim to her lips. "Take your time," he encouraged. Eleanor drank slowly, a few sips at a time. The water seemed to bring a flicker of life back to her face, a momentary relief washing over the lines of age and distress. She kept her eyes on his, a deep, knowing intensity in her gaze. "You are a kind soul, Ethan Miller," she said, her voice surprisingly clear. Ethan blinked. "How did you know my name, ma'am?" She smiled faintly. "Your name tag, dear boy. A common feature of your industry, wouldn't you agree?" "Oh. Right," Ethan said, feeling a slight flush. He had forgotten he was wearing it. He lowered the glass when she signaled she was done. "Can I get you anything else? Maybe some broth? Or a piece of pie to settle your stomach?" he offered, genuinely concerned. Eleanor slowly shook her head. "No, thank you. I must confess, I won't be ordering anything else. I simply needed a place to stop." And a drink of water. She reached into her small handbag and pulled out a single, crisp $50 bill. She slid it across the table toward Ethan. "This is for the water, and for your kindness," she stated, her voice suddenly resolute. "Please don't argue." Ethan hesitated. $50 for a glass of water was absurd. "Ma'am, the water is complimentary. I can't take this." "You already have," she insisted, giving him a look that brooked no argument. "Now, I need to rest for a moment more. I have an appointment." Ethan, sensing this was a battle he could not win, took the bill. "Thank you, ma'am. If you need anything at all, please just call." He walked away, but kept a discreet eye on her. He saw her pull a thick, sealed manila envelope from her bag, and place it on the seat beside her. Then, she closed her eyes again, this time with an air of finality. Ethan returned to his duties, the $50 bill feeling heavy in his apron pocket. The diner hummed with the slow rhythm of the late afternoon. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Eleanor Vance remained motionless, and finally, a chill of unease went down Ethan's spine. She was too still. He walked back to the booth, a nervous knot tightening in his stomach. "Ma'am?" he asked softly, placing a gentle hand on the back of the vinyl seat. No response. That he leaned in closer. Her breathing had stopped. Her face, though pale, had a serene look, as if the profound weariness had finally been lifted. Eleanor Vance had died, quietly and without fuss, in booth 6 of the diner's Delight. Ethan felt a dizzying wave of shock. He quickly alerted Sal, who, for once, lost his grimace and looked genuinely shaken. Sal immediately called 911. Within an hour, the quiet diner was swarming with police officers and paramedics. After the initial interviews and the somber removal of Eleanor's body, the police, finding no immediate next of kin or identification other than a driver's license, focused on the few belongings left behind. The small leather handbag contained only a few dollars, some tissues, and an old photograph of a young man with Ethan's coloring. The critical item, however, was the large manila envelope resting on the seat where she had placed it. A detective, a serious woman named Detective Ramirez, picked up the envelope. It was sealed with heavy red wax and bore an inscription in elegant, looping script, "To be opened upon my demise. Read by Attorney Charles Hawthorne, ESQ. Immediate action required." Beneath the main inscription, a short, handwritten note was taped to the outside, scrawled in a shaky hand: "If you are reading this, please find the young man who showed me the final kindness. The one with the water. His name is Ethan Miller." Detective Ramirez looked up from the envelope, her eyes scanning the few remaining employees, Sal and Ethan. "Ethan Miller?" she asked. Ethan, pale and still reeling from the shock, stepped forward. "That's me, Detective. You were the one who gave the lady the water?" "Yes," he confirmed quietly. Detective Ramirez looked at the envelope, then back at the simple, worn diner. This wasn't the scene of a crime, it was the intersection of a life's end and a bizarre instruction. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice official but curious. "It seems Mrs. Vance, Eleanor Vance, made some very specific provisions regarding you. We will need to contact her attorney immediately." And just like that, a simple act of kindness, a glass of water offered in a dusty roadside diner, had set Ethan Miller on a path that would irrevocably shatter the predictable routine of his life. He felt the $50 bill in his pocket, a sudden, heavy weight of portent. The following days for Ethan were a blur of police follow-ups, sympathetic whispers from the diner regulars, and the surreal feeling that the world around him had momentarily paused its routine just for him. Sal, uncharacteristically, gave Ethan 2 paid days off. On Thursday morning, Ethan received a call from a number with a New York City area code. "Mr. Ethan Miller." The voice on the other end was smooth, deep, and carried the crisp, precise diction of old money and law school. "This is Charles Hawthorne. I am the executor and legal counsel for the estate of the late Eleanor Vance." Ethan nervously clutched the phone. "Yes, sir. Detective Ramirez said you'd be in touch." "Indeed. The circumstances of Mrs. Vance's passing, while tragic, were thoroughly pre-planned. She left explicit instructions, Mr. Miller. Instructions that necessitate your presence here in Manhattan, immediately. Ethan swallowed hard. Manhattan. A world away from the greasy vinyl and chrome of The Diner's Delight. I don't understand, sir. I just gave her some water. Hawthorne chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. Mr. Miller, in the eyes of my client, you gave her more than water. You gave her grace and kindness in her final moments. Please take the Acela Express into Penn Station tomorrow morning. My associate will meet you. All expenses are covered. Do not worry about a thing. The next day, Ethan, wearing the best, and only, suit he owned, felt like a nervous alien in the towering, echoing halls of the Hawthorne and Finch law offices, located on the 40th floor of a prestigious building overlooking Central Park. Charles Hawthorne was everything Ethan was not, impeccably tailored, silver-haired, radiating quiet authority. He ushered Ethan into a large, mahogany-paneled conference room where the only light came from the vast windows and a single ornate lamp illuminating a heavy leather-bound folder. Thank you for coming, Mr. Miller, Hawthorne said, settling into a chair across a large table from Ethan. Before we proceed, I must confirm, you are Ethan James Miller, born July 12, 2001, in Trenton, New Jersey? Yes, sir, Ethan confirmed, utterly bewildered by the personal detail. Hawthorne picked up the leather folder. As per the terms of her last will and testament, dated 3 weeks ago, I am now legally required to read the relevant sections to you. He opened the folder. The atmosphere was thick with silence, broken only by the distant sounds of city traffic filtering in from 40 stories below. The late Eleanor Vance, Hawthorne began, reading in a measured cadence, was a woman of considerable means, derived from the textile manufacturing company, Vance Textiles, founded by her late husband. She was, until recently, the sole living beneficiary of her family line. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He had to remind himself this had nothing to do with him. Hawthorne cleared his throat and read Section 5, which was titled, The Provision of Final Comfort. To the kind-hearted young man, whose name is Ethan, who offered me the final, necessary drop of water at the Diner's Delight on the day of my passing, a gesture born not of duty, but of genuine empathy in my moment of extreme need, I bequeath the sum necessary to secure his future comfort and prosperity. Ethan's breath hitched. Some. He thought maybe $10,000, enough to pay off his student loan and buy a used car. A generous reward for a glass of water. Hawthorne paused, letting the words sink in, before continuing with the next subsection, the specifics. Due to the unique circumstances, and after a lifetime of regretting my own past failures of compassion, I hereby revoke all previous charitable and distant familial bequests and assign the entirety of my disposable estate to Ethan James Miller. Hawthorne looked up, his eyes holding a neutral, practiced expression. Mr. Miller, the disposable estate of Eleanor Vance currently consists of a diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, liquid assets, and real estate, including her primary residence in the Hamptons and several commercial properties in Manhattan. After taxes and administrative fees, the current estimated net value you are set to inherit is, Hawthorne deliberately lowered his voice, delivering the figure with the casual indifference of a man who dealt in billions. Approximately $45 million. $45 million. The number hung in the air like a physical weight, crushing the quiet formality of the room. 45 million. It was a number that didn't belong in Ethan's vocabulary. It belonged to movie stars, oil tycoons, or lottery winners, not to a perpetually tired diner waiter who worked the graveyard shift. Ethan didn't say anything. He didn't faint. He didn't cheer. He just sat, his mind a sudden, terrifying blank slate. The life he had known, the endless cycle of tips, rent, and Sal's grumbling, vanished in a blinding flash. Mr. Miller? Hawthorne prompted gently. But, why? Ethan finally managed, his voice a cracked whisper. I don't understand. She didn't know me. 45 million. For a glass of water. Hawthorne leaned back, steepling his fingers. That is where the second part of the envelope, the personal letter, comes in. Mrs. Vance, it turns out, had been deliberately seeking a place to die. She was terminally ill, refused hospice care, and wanted her final moments to be simple, unplanned, and observed by a stranger with kindness in their heart. She essentially used her fortune as a litmus test for humanity. Hawthorne pulled out a thick, cream-colored letter from the folder. Ethan, if you are reading this, know that I watched you. I watched you clean the spill for the elderly gentleman last week. I saw you share your lunch break sandwich with the homeless woman by the dumpster. I knew I needed to find a soul unspoiled by cynicism. I needed someone whose kindness was innate, not transactional. The truth is, Hawthorne continued, reading Eleanor's elegant script, I had a son. A boy named James. He looked strikingly like you, Ethan. He died 30 years ago in a terrible accident. He was working at a volunteer soup kitchen, ironically, serving water to the needy. After his death, I withdrew, becoming brittle and cold. I regretted every moment I had withheld love or failed to perform a simple kindness, including to my own child. I came to your diner because it was anonymous and desperate. I was dehydrated and dying. When you didn't just place the glass down, but you held it for me, the ultimate act of service and humility, I saw James. I saw the pure, uncomplicated goodness I had failed to nurture and reward in my own life. This bequest is not a payment for the water, it is my final act of penance and my hope that your innate goodness will be amplified by this opportunity. Do good, Ethan. Live a life worthy of the kindness you possess. Hawthorne set the letter down. The silence returned, this time heavy with emotional revelation. So, you see, Mr. Miller, Hawthorne concluded. The $45 million is not for the service. It is for the sentiment. It is her final, desperate, and magnificent attempt to redeem a lifetime of regret through one perfect, selfless moment of a stranger's empathy. Ethan slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the crisp $50 bill. It felt like a relic from a past life. What happens now? Ethan asked, the first practical question that crossed his mind. Hawthorne smiled, a genuine, warm smile this time. Now, Mr. Miller, your life ceases to be about tips and shifts. It becomes about managing a substantial estate. We have a lot of paperwork, legal transfers, and financial planning to do. But for today, I suggest you take this check. He slid a heavy, engraved check across the table. It was a transfer for a preliminary fund, a 7-figure sum, to allow Ethan immediate financial freedom. Ethan picked up the check. His hand trembled not from nervousness, but from the realization that he was holding the key to a future he couldn't even imagine. The life of Ethan Miller, the waiter, was officially over. The journey of Ethan Miller, the benefactor, was about to begin. The transition from $3.50 an hour plus tips to managing a $45 million fortune was not smooth, it was a dizzying, terrifying freefall. Ethan hired Hawthorne and Finch to manage the entire estate for the first year, trusting Charles Hawthorne's professional integrity and understanding of Eleanor's intent. His first practical act was to leave the diner's delight. He didn't just quit, he bought Sal a new, top-of-the-line industrial dishwasher and paid the salaries of every employee for the next 3 months. He even bought the whole team dinner at the fanciest restaurant in the county, a restaurant he could now afford to buy outright. The old diner life faded quickly, replaced by a world of quarterly reports, investment meetings, and the unsettling freedom of being able to purchase anything he desired. He bought a simple, comfortable apartment in Philadelphia, avoiding the opulence of Eleanor's Hamptons estate, which he planned to turn into something meaningful. Yet, despite the luxury, Ethan felt hollow. The money solved problems but didn't provide purpose. He realized Eleanor's letter, "Live a life worthy of the kindness you possess," was not a suggestion, it was a spiritual mandate. He couldn't just exist in his new wealth, the way he had merely existed in his old poverty. 6 months after the reading of the will, Ethan walked into Hawthorne's office not with investment queries, but with a meticulously detailed plan. "Mr. Hawthorne," Ethan stated, placing a binder on the table. "I need to set up a foundation. The Eleanor Vance Kindness Initiative. Hawthorne raised an eyebrow, impressed. A charitable foundation. Excellent, Mr. Miller. What is its focus? Simple, Ethan said, tapping the binder. It will fund microgrants for local heroes. Small, immediate, and impactful acts of kindness, the ones that go unnoticed. Ethan explained his vision, the Last Drop Fund, offering small grants to people like him, low-wage service workers struggling with unexpected expenses, a broken car, an overdue medical bill. An emergency safety net, given instantly, with no strings attached, rewarding their daily empathy, the Booth 6 bursaries, scholarships for vocational training programs, specifically aimed at single parents or individuals trying to pivot out of minimum wage service jobs. And what about the Hamptons estate, Mr. Miller? Hawthorne asked. That, Ethan said, a light in his eyes, will be the Foundation's headquarters and a retreat center. We will call it James House. It will host exhausted service workers for a week of free, genuine rest and recovery. The ultimate reward for a life of thankless service. Ethan wasn't just writing checks, he was replicating the moment in Booth 6 on a massive scale. He was paying forward the dignity Eleanor Vance had afforded him. The water he had given her had been an emergency measure, his foundation would be preventative care for good people. 1 year after the reading, Ethan was standing in the newly renovated, sunlit great room of James House. It was airy and comfortable, designed for quiet contemplation, not lavish parties. He was no longer the tired waiter. He was confident, engaged, and genuinely happy, not because of the money, but because of the mission that he looked down at a framed picture on the mantel, the same one Eleanor had carried in her purse, a sepia-toned photograph of her son, James. He had his mother's bright eyes and a strong jaw, and yes, he did bear a striking resemblance to Ethan. The irony was not lost on him. He had lived his entire life in scarcity, only to discover his ultimate purpose lay in giving away the abundance that had randomly dropped into his lap. He was the unintended heir, the final recipient of a lifetime of regret and a sudden, sublime moment of grace, the $50 bill that Eleanor had paid him, the absurd, extravagant payment for a glass of water, was framed and hung on the wall of his private office. It was his constant reminder, value is not determined by the cost of the object, but by the love and intent behind the action. One day, while reviewing applications for the first round of the Last Drop Fund, Ethan found one that gave him pause. A young waitress in a small town in Arizona needed $1,200 to fix her broken-down car so she wouldn't lose her night shift. Her name was Sarah, and her application was heartbreakingly simple. Attached was a recommendation from her boss, praising her kindness and describing how she always made sure the elderly patrons had extra sugar and never left without a fresh glass of water. Ethan smiled. He immediately approved the grant for the full amount and added a note, "Keep doing the small, important things, Sarah. They matter more than you know." He realized he hadn't just received a fortune, he had inherited a profound responsibility to observe the world with Eleanor's late-life clarity and James' early-life compassion. The shock of the inheritance was finally replaced by the deep satisfaction of fulfilling a legacy that wasn't his by blood, but by a simple, human connection forged in a moment of final, desperate thirst. His life, once defined by the tired cycle of eat and drink on a flashing neon sign, was now defined by empathy, purpose, and the powerful, echoing ripple effect of a single glass of water.